Hey guys, it's Tom Bucks. Welcome to MST.TV. It's been a while since I talked with you guys in camera. I am down here in the corner today because I need all that space to illustrate to you guys how to crush Orcust. Again, because we've talked about this before, but it seems like the deck has morphed into a completely different monster over time. It's evolved. Dun, 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 dun. No, we're not doing Pokemon here. So we're mainly going to be covering Sky Striker Orcust, the most recent form of Orcust, and Pure Orcust because their core winning strategies are very, very similar. And we're going to put aside the Lunalight Orcust and Cyber Dragon Orcust because they're monsters in their own right. So there's really 4 talking points in this video. One, what makes Orcust so strong? We have to understand what makes the deck really function, and usually a really good deck checks off like 3 to 4 boxes of what makes a deck really good, but Orcust seems to check off way more than that, which is why we're going to discuss each of these points, and maybe we will use that to identify how to kind of break them apart. Secondly, we're going to look into the Orcust board itself. The board that they set up seems so minimalistic, but the amount of interaction they have can easily just stun you out completely. And one of the biggest problem is they're really good at killing their opponent. So in other words, if you don't finish them off, they have a full chance of completely countering you. So we're also going to look in their board, which is super misleading right now. The most recent boards, of course, they have a Masquerena, they have a Babble, maybe 1 or 2 back row to back them up. It seems like there's not very much going on, but if you've played against them, you know that one wrong move and you're dead the next turn. Or even if you're not dead the next turn, you have no way of keeping up with them anymore. And then finally, we'll go into going first cards against them, going second against them, and we'll just talk about that with various cards, going down different kinds of interaction to see how it would play out, especially when they have such good chaining timing against you. The timing of that deck is so fast that they usually outspeed you and outmaneuver you, and the only thing they really have to care about is staying alive, as they can cycle most of the play during their own turn. They can reset up and everything is basically free. Anyways, if you guys are going to enjoy this one, so make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, hit subscribe, and if you also want to show your support towards this channel, don't forget to check out the Patreon link down in the description below. Really appreciate all of you guys for joining in, and well, let's jump into this one. Okay, to look into Orcust, we're going to understand why the deck is so strong. So first of all, they have a strong and consistent low resource combo that requires basically 1 summon that sends a card into the graveyard. It doesn't exactly have to be a summon, it could be a Foolish Burial, but as long as they're able to put 1 piece of Orcust into the graveyard, they can set up their entire board quite easily. And with the addition of IP Masquerena, they don't even need to end with an Orcust on the field to feel that Orcust threat. So they have a 1-card combos that starts off very much like an I guess a Scrap Recycler, could be Mathematician, most likely Mathematician these days, and Armageddon Knight, Foolish Burial, Dark Refer, anything that's like Dark Refer and beyond, they're just like icing on the cake, which is just so consistent for them. It's almost like the Draconet Guard Dragon combo, except that you don't have to run any bricks in your deck whatsoever because they're all just naturally part of the deck. So they've got a consistent 1-card combo. That's part 1. And part 2 is they got a long list of counterplay that they can use against you. And when they counterplay you, usually they can kill you right after because Boral Sword is an easy access card for them. Dingirzu sends a card into the graveyard, which kind of clears the board open for an OTK. So quick OTKs are what they're known for. Thirdly, they are fully capable of recycling every single resource that they play. Maybe not so much for the extra deck, but it doesn't really matter because as long as they're able to cycle out most of the stuff in the main deck, back into the banish pile, back into the graveyard, if they can cycle that, their boss monsters don't run out because they'll just revive them from the graveyard, and they're just constantly cycling that skeleton over and over again, giving them endless amounts of gas because they are the gas station. They just never run out. And fourthly, I guess now that they merge in with Sky Striker, they have coverage against various Floodgate-esque monsters, or even some types of Floodgates themselves. So Vanity's Fiend, well, there's more options. I know some people play Impermanence in their deck, some people don't, but like for those who do, well, now they also have Widow Anchor, they also have Afterburners if they want additional like back row pop, which is a thing that some of them desire, especially when it comes to like Mystic Mine, stuff like that, or other kinds of Floodgates, like there can be only one. They have options to clear it now, and that just adds another layer of annoyance for them, or for us anyways, playing against the deck. And fifth, they have natural outs against Mystic Mine. That's right, even if they don't have the Sky Striker package, they already have it with the popularity rising with like Orchestrated Return. It's a staple now. It's like a 3 of because they're able to shove in an Orcust card into the graveyard. So you can clear your board, draw 2 cards. As long as you still have Babel, they can still play on your turn. As long as they're not dead, their Mystic Mine dies, and you basically just get killed. You know, so it's as simple as that. So they can out Mystic Mine naturally, even if they don't draw into Spell Trap removal. So as a combo deck, Mystic Mine was like a kryptonite, but now it seems like they've gained that slight immunity, or not immunity, but resistance to that kryptonite of Mystic Mine. And I guess 6, they have the best removal in the game, which is Dingirsu, which they'll summon on their turn for 1 removal and once on your own turn. So over the course of a turn passing and coming back, you would have 2 cards non-targeting sent to the graveyard. In other words, it makes most boards look fragile. And 7, finally, they are so adept at just not being afraid of any form of destruction. Even more so with IP Masquerena now. If they go into like a Nightmare Unicorn, that Nightmare Unicorn through the IP Masquerena, well, can't really get hit. And they have other forms of like removal as well, such as Zero Boros, which has been a very popular choice. I actually got OTK'd 8,000 damage recently through a Zero Boros because I was trying to protect myself by constantly banishing stuff. But after a while, I kind of just took a huge fat amount of damage and I just died from Zero Boros. And Zero Boros is also another threat because your whole board could potentially get banished in like a longer game. I'm gonna put that in quotes because it's not really a long game, but like if you've eaten most of the interactions against it. I actually ate a full board once, still came out, but couldn't kill them because I ran out of gas and they don't run out of gas. So those are the 7 reasons why the deck is super strong. If you can kind of break it down, if you experience it yourself, you kind of know why. So now let's look into their board. So here's a board representation and the amount of interaction that your opponent might have against you. So we have an IP Masquerena, we have a Babel, and maybe we have 1 or 2 back row. And we're going to count down the amount of interactions that they have against you. And sometimes if you actually count this out, it seems like a ridiculous amount. It's not just about, oh, I've got this many negates, I've got that many negates. No, it's about the amount of interaction and the goal that they're trying to achieve. And they achieve their goal quite easily. The first goal is to survive the turn. The second goal is cripple the board before their own turn starts or set up their own board. So those are the 2 goals, and we're going to count down the amount of interactions that they may have. First interaction they have with you would be IP Masquerena. It's the only monster on board, but since they have IP Masquerena, one scary thought about that is if they're playing the Sky Striker back row, if they have that 1 Widow Anchor available and they have the 3 spells, they're going to steal your monster, and that makes that monster live. Although they don't really need the Widow Anchor to make that card live, simply because they can just use a Harp Horror to put a monster on the board right away, and that's that. Even a Symbol Skeleton can kind of do the same trick and offer to remove cards off of your side of the field, and they can time it. They can be patient and time the critical weak points of your board and cripple you there, because they have, remember, the 2 goals would be to survive the turn and cripple the board. Usually those 2 kind of go hand in hand. They're kind of synergistic. But okay, so the first interaction would be IP Masquerena. It could go into a Nightmare Unicorn or a Zero Boros and wipe your board clean before you get a chance to activate your traps that you have just set, which makes traps a little bit slow against them. So interaction number 1, IP Masquerena can act as board removal and just completely threaten you. Second interaction is Orchestrated Nightmare. Orchestrated Nightmare can set up the entire board, and there's many things that Orchestrated Nightmare can do. So this is just interaction number 2, and it's already like another branching play. They can dump into Harp Horror so that they can set up more boards to play. They can dump in a Symbol Skeleton if they have a Dingirsu in the graveyard, which is most likely the case. They usually set up a Dingirsu in there, and there's usually already Harp Horror in there. So what Orchestrated Nightmare can serve as is a damage step prevention, or they can use it so that if you forgot about it and you try to attack into some of their weaker monsters, you're going to run into it and your monster is going to be destroyed by battle, and that is rather rough. So it can also serve as a form of damage step removal, especially for larger attacking threats. But aside from that, they can also throw in Gizmek as an option. Usually if they want to prevent any sort of stuff destroyed by battle, they'll throw in Gizmek in there because it boosts a lot, and it gives them the ability to summon out another body, preventing them from dying. Gizmek, in terms of during your opponent's turn, is basically just a body, but then it's also acting as board setup for the turn after, because now it can banish a couple cards out of the extra deck and well, basically pop a card on the field, forcing a very, like, forcing you to kind of counter it right away, which is very annoying because resources is already kind of scarce when it comes to dealing with the deck. So just the Orchestrated Nightmare is able to set up a lot. Play number 3 would be going to Harp Horror. Harp Horror is another interaction which puts out a body, in other words, another chump block. Play number 4 is to go into a Simple Skeleton. Simple Skeleton is going to revive the Dingirzu, acting as another form of removal. Again, they can be so patient. As long as you're not threatening the Babble, that's interaction number 4 right there. They can send one of your cards to the graveyard. And interaction 5 we already talked about, which is Gizmek. So those are the more standardized interactions that they'll have against you. Play by play, they'll have 2 removals, and they can time it. The biggest thing is because most of these are non-targeting, non-destructive removal, they can time it at the choke point of your combo and your board will be weakened. Now, in terms of back row, now usually there might be 1 or 2 back row, especially if their hand has like Call by the Grave. So in other words, you're also eating a removal from the graveyard, which is a form of negation to prevent your combos from moving forward. And they also potentially might have Impermanence to negate you. Impermanence is a very important card, especially to a lot of combo-based decks, because it can't be Called by the Grave, and they might have an Impermanence for another negation that you're trying to commit through another monster effect, which makes, again, things even more difficult. Now we're on to, that was 6 and 7. Now we're going to look into something that's a bit more situational. Potentially, another thing that they can do is bluff, because once they got you scared enough, they can bluff set one of their Orchestrated Return, and you might read it like a Call by the Grave. So I guess bluffing is an option. Interaction number 8 is the Counter Trap. So in the case where it's not just the current board we see, which is the IP Masquerena, you might see another copy of Galatea being revived. And when you see that Galatea revived from the graveyard, it's instinctive to think that one of the back row is potentially the Counter Trap Crescendo. And if they have Crescendo, well, that just means they have another form of removal, which is potentially 3 removals from their opening play, which is pretty ridiculous if you ask me. These are the kind of play that make the Guard Dragon plays seem kind of minuscule in comparison. And play number 9 is if they do have that Galatea on the field and decide to use her to set up additional resources, they're getting a +1 during your turn to either guarantee that their stuff won't get negated because they'll set up another Counter Trap, another Crescendo in the back row, or they're going to set up a return. So if you play that Mystic Mine, they're going to set up the return, and then if that Mystic Mine is now live, that Orchestrated Return will now eventually retaliate by letting him draw cards and just get rid of your Mystic Mine on their own turn. And then during their turn, they're going to basically cycle through 1 through 5 all over again, and you're gonna have to try and kill them again. If you fail, you're gonna get countered by a Boral Sword in the face with perhaps another Dingirzu. So those are the options that they have during your turn. So the board might be like, what, 3 or 4 cards on the field, but there's about 10 things or 10 options for them to play, and 3 of them will remove cards on your side of the field during your turn. And if I missed any other forms of interactions that they may have against you, leave it down in the comment section. Please share with us. Appreciate you guys for doing so. And let's go into various cards we can do to counter against Orcust. Okay, if you guys made it to this portion of the video, we're going to look into how to counter and side against them. If you're going to be going first or second, or whether this is the game 1 or the sided games, Abyss Dweller should be in your main deck by now. I don't know what you're thinking if you're not main decking this card. Oh, it's in the side deck because some of the deck profiles I've seen have it sided. Well, does it make sense to not have the correct option in your very first game? I don't think so, and since it's such a popular choice nowadays, it should just be in the main deck. Sacrifice some of your big titans out there and just put this monster in just so that you can survive for the next turn, or you can cripple your opponent, because if they can't set up, the game is almost over. They're gonna have to use their own side cards to counter you, so it becomes more of a sided battle, and Abyss Dweller does put that battle in your favor. So whether you're going first or second, Abyss Dweller should be the first thing that you put out. I'm playing Safer Thunder Dragons. My end board now looks more like this. I put out an Appaloosa just for some various monster or protection against like Nibiru and all that stuff. But aside from that, the next monster next to it is a Hope Harbinger, and then I have a Dweller. So that Hope Harbinger can absorb the attack, so I can use Dweller twice. That was my goal ultimately, and it does seem like it's working out in my favor these days. So I'm really, really happy about that. That being said, so aside from Dweller, let's go on to actually the list of things what you should do when you're going first. Okay, Abyss Dweller aside as some of the going first card, I would say there's counter cards to everything. For Abyss Dweller, even if you dwell them on the very first action and they did not have impermanence or they did not have Widow Anchor against you, that's like a 4-card option to kind of negate that. If they don't have any of that, it's not over for them just yet. Depending on what they play. If they play Allure of Darkness and they banish, say, one of their monsters, they can easily just go into a Galatea if they have a free special summon extender, and then when they go into the Galatea, they are able to kind of put the banished one from Allure of Darkness back in and set up the field spell, or they can hard draw into the field spell and they can play through there. If they're able to actually get the field spell, it becomes so much harder because during your turn, the Dweller will have to try to break through a bunch of walls, and it is not that easy. Remember, their goal is to just survive the turn, so if they're able to put out the Babel, it's not over just yet. You have to stay 2 steps ahead or else they're going to outgrind you once again. So, but still, Abyss Dweller is still one of those cards that fully counter them from preventing them from even playing their cards as long as it goes through and they don't have Babel. And the board are obviously much easier to manage. Option number 2 would be to summon out Artifact Scythe out of your deck and just completely locking them out. Because if they don't have access to the extra deck, you don't have to deal with it in Gears during your turn. And even if they have interaction against you during your turn, it's nothing as serious as a Dingirzu kind of wrecking your board along the way to kind of cut the damage down. So that is a very significant part, and you can potentially even keep some of the things to keep your opponent stunned. Make a Dweller because you're able to survive for the next turn, and now they're shut out again. So keeping them shut out is probably one of the better ways of destroying them. Sometimes you're able to push through. You can just gun through with all the resources you have and then make a Boral Sword and attack for game. Sometimes you're able to get into that position, but if you're not, you have to stun them out again because they're really good at wrecking boards. That's kind of an understatement, really. Third option, Floodgates. There's actually 3 lines of Floodgates. One Floodgate would be the anti-effect based Floodgates. We have Soul Drain and Skill Drain. Skill Drain, interestingly enough, is actually a very, very good card because as strong as they would get, they would only get to like 3,000 max. And as long as you're able to spit out 3,000 bodies frequently, I don't know why we don't play this card in Safer Thunder. I think we should definitely give it a try, even though it's like a kind of a sacky card. Playing Skill Drain makes the gameplay a lot easier to deal with, and you can spit some pretty big monsters out, just saying, and deal with the rest of the board, and nothing really becomes a threat, really. So there's Skill Drain. There's also Soul Drain, which acts as well, a Dweller as a trap, and that completely shuts out anything that activates in the banished pile as well, but it locks yourself out too, so just be very careful when you activate that card, and remember to pay life. Second kind of Floodgate, Summon based Floodgate. There can be only 1 in Summon limit. Again, that's really good at crippling the setup, but it's not complete. There are ways to out those particular Floodgates. Nightmare Phoenix, Dingirzu, they're still not locked out options, so if they get there, they will be able to remove it. And the last Floodgate is anti-banishing, which is coming in the form of Imperial Iron Wall, but that will get like 100% easily get like sent to the graveyard through a Dingirzu, so that's not really gonna work out. But if you're able to set that card up before anything else happens and they're not able to go into an Orcust Link monster, well, you are in for a very easy turn next turn because they're stuck. They're stuck without any kind of interaction. They can't go into Gizmek, they can't use Nightmares. It's pretty much a lot easier at that point. So yeah, there's that. And I guess the last option would be Call by the Grave. Call by the Grave is a really good card. I think this is a first or second card, so I guess I'll use this card to kind of segue into going second. During your turn, hold on to it, and you can use the block out, well, hand traps for one thing, but if you set it against your opponent, you can time it according to their Symbol Skeleton if you don't want them to revive a card, and it really depends on like how your opponent's setting up the board. Sometimes you want to banish it before they use Symbol Skeleton, hit the Symbol Skeleton so they don't have it for their own turn and your turn, so that means almost like no Dingirzu coming up. That's like an option, but that's a very specific scenario. The more common scenario is that you wait for the Dingirzu to be targeted by the Symbol Skeleton, and then you target the same copy of the Dingirzu, and you just banish that one. Now your opponent's Dingirzus don't have any effects whatsoever. And that's actually a really big win, because during their own turn, they're not going to be able to use Dingirzus to send one of your cards to the graveyard or retrieve one of their banished cards to reattach as material. So that's probably one of the more key notes of using Call by the Grave. Call by the Grave is an amazing card, and the same kind of applies to DD Crow. You can just hold on to it and make sure that you can time it well enough so that it can protect one of your cards. And let's go into, I guess, for going second, hand traps. Aside from DD Crow, you have the option to use Artifact Lancia. Artifact Lancia, again, most of these hand traps, if your opponent has Call by the Grave, like they have it, they have it. But if you can hand trap them with a Lancia, it kind of skips their turn because they have no form of setup. There's no body to remove, and they basically have to eat it. But the counterpart to this is also, you can also use Chaos Hunter. This has been mentioned in like the previous older video. You just have to time it correctly. You have to wait till the Dingirzu has already been summoned. Remember, whenever Dingirzu summons, ask them which effect they're activating, and once they have chosen their effect, then you can chain it. The thing is, they have to choose. It's actually in the rules and in the ruling that they have to choose which effect they're going to activate. They can't just be like, oh, you're chaining that, I'm changing my effect. They can't do that. It says activate one of these effects. So which effect are you using? And they just have to choose. And then you can put out Chaos Hunter. Then for the rest of the turn, you basically have a monster to answer to that problem. Since your opponent cannot banish your cards, even Zero Boros doesn't become an issue. A lot of cards get shut out. Another really popular hand trap these days would be Skullmeister. Skullmeister negates the effect of something that activates in the graveyard. It's not limited to once per turn and gives you more coverage compared to Ghost Bell. So you can time it to the correct card and you can just handle it there. But if you have multiple copies of Skullmeister, it doesn't harm you in any way because you can still use them for both effects and has a decent body of 17. Next hand trap, Phantasme. They do link summon a lot. Phantasme isn't exactly a very powerful card against the deck, but it does let you dig for your other hand traps like DD Crow, like Artifact Lancia. So in that regard, it gives you additional reach during your opponent's turn. So it has some value in that regard. Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, you can use it to prevent the Heart Horror from summoning out, and you can even prevent say the Orcust Nightmare from putting a card into the graveyard, which could be crucial. I think it's hard to tell when is it a good timing, so better to pair it off with a second counter rather than just solely relying on that Ash Blossom. But if you only had the one Ash Blossom, I'd say wait for the Heart Horror, because Heart Horror is the one that actually puts out a body, and they need that body to set up the Galatea. That's just my opinion. They could have like a Greph where they can just throw another card into the graveyard. I'm not too sure, but that's just how it is. Or perhaps even just hit the very first monster, hit the Armageddon Knight, hit the Mathematician, just to prevent them from going too far. And that also applies for Veiler. What about Nibiru then? Is Nibiru worth it? Let's count the summons right now. The first normal summon, dumping a card into the graveyard. Next one, Heart Horror, summoning out the Symbol Skeleton. I think there's already an Orchestrated Nightmare banished anyway to put the monster into the graveyard. Okay, so then we go into a Galatea. Galatea puts one back in to set a card into the field, and then they go into the Dingirzu. Dingirzu reattaches, and we banish the Symbol Skeleton to summon out additional card. And then they go into an IP Masquerena. So yes, you could Nibiru them, but what value are you getting? The grave's already all set up. The field spell's already on the field. There's not really much you can do against that. If you give them a Nibiru token, you can give them a tiny token, and that would... Nibiru is basically trading 1-for-1 with the IP Masquerena. But if they revive an additional card, if they set another back row and they put back the Link monster and then you Nibiru them, that has more value for sure, because now the back row is dead, the Crescendo is dead, and it's not too hard to work with this board because your monster is the biggest threat at the moment with the 3k attack, and their thing has basically no defense, so you can just ram it over. So Nibiru, kind of worth it. I don't think it's actually that ideal personally. In terms of hand traps, I recommend the other ones previously. Okay, two decent techs I kind of want to suggest. Like, they kind of go in opposite spectrum. One is to banish everything, and the other is to prevent all forms of banishing from the graveyard. First one is System Down. Very popular choice against machines. It banishes all machines on the field and in the graveyard for the low price of 1,000 life points. Even if Orcust chooses to banish everything, well, they still die, and because everything is still gonna get wiped off the board, and there's no threat, and the slow start for the next turn you can basically beat them while they're down, because if you make an Abyss Dweller now, there is no threat for any sort of countermeasure whatsoever. So that's a big win. And if they counterside with an Artifact Lancia, remember that now they can't banish anything. The counter shot doesn't work. You can output as much damage as possible. Try to go for an OTA. Try to put out that Boral Sword now. If you're playing Thunders, just Tribute, go for it, just kill them. And that's usually like a win on its own. So just because they counter you doesn't mean that they're in a good position themselves. Usually they only want to use Artifact Lancia if they are going second. Not so much when they're going first, because it doesn't really work that well, because it actually cripples their own ability to stay alive as well. You might be thinking, why don't I just use Evenly Matched? And, you know, I can just remove all the cards face down, leaving one. Well, the card that they're going to leave up is the Babble. They'll banish everything. Remember, the whole point of the battle phase is to stay alive. The whole point of interacting with you is to stay alive, and they're staying alive. And as long as they can keep one of the most powerful cards, Babble, on the field, they'll keep Babble on the field, and now you're just going to have to play through their entire graveyard. That's all. You know, so Evenly Matched, not that great. Being able to banish all their stuff is much better. Now, the other monster that I would be suggesting to play that almost give them no response timing is Kaiku. Kaiku makes it so that your opponent cannot banish cards from either player's graveyard, and that's a continuous effect. So the moment you drop it, you don't have to worry about well, most things happening. The only card that can really come out would be the Gizmek, because that banishes from the top of the deck. But outside of Gizmek, you don't have to worry about Orchestrated Nightmare, you don't have to worry about Orchestrated Symbol Skeleton, you don't have to worry about any of those cards whatsoever, you don't have to worry about the battle phase. So there's a lot less threats in general. Even if they have a back row, they're not going to 90% of the time, unless it's impermanence, it's not going to interact with your Kaiku. And here's the thing, if they want to interact with your Kaiku, it's so difficult because they have to preemptively do it. If they don't preemptively do it, and you're playing a deck that just has so many ways to just bounce your opponent's cards, destroy your opponent's board, they're going to feel the pressure right away to do it, just in case they enter another situation where they don't have that kind of timing anymore. So Kaiku forces your opponent to play all their impermanences right away, and that might make life a little bit easier. And if you're in North America and you don't get completely stunned out, in North America, of course, you run TCG NA timing, where, well, if you summon a Chaos Dragon, Levianeer, and pop some cards, let's just say they don't get their effects to activate, which is a big win on, I guess, our part, but it's actually kind of like improper, but whatever, you guys kind of get the idea. And that is all I got for this video, guys. Hopefully it was in-depth enough for most people to comprehend. For those of you guys who are not playing meta decks, but you are losing to Orcust, maybe it gives you some insight of why Orcust is so strong, especially in that like play-by-play breakdown. And if you guys enjoyed this one, give me a thumbs up. If you guys want to check out more stuff from MST.TV, make sure you hit that subscribe button, ding the notification bell. If you guys want to help support this channel, make more videos like this possible, well, check out the Patreon link down in the description below. If you're going to be making any kind of purchase, use the TCG player link down in the description. Or if you're going to be purchasing mats from ImperiumDuelist.com, input code TOMBOX10 for, well, a 10% discount. More money in your pocket. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one.